A crystal vase shattered against marble, diamonds scattering in every direction. That was the first thing any maid ever saw upon crossing into the Morrison mansion, and historically, the last, because nobody survived a day working for the billionaire's infamous triplets. Rumors swirled like the morning mist over Lake Lucerne. Were they monsters? Impossible brats? Rich kids unleashed in a world custom-built to obey? Press clippings whispered about the Morrison triplets as untamable. Three faces, identical in features, mischievous in smile, and notorious for sending house staff fleeing by noon. The family's fortune was legendary, but their chaos was mythic. And lately the grand house echoed hollow, save for the laughter, sharp as broken glass, of the children no maid could outlast. Enter Amina Johnson, not by design, but necessity. Her suitcase was battered, her shoes clean but worn, and she stood at the grand iron gates clutching a photo of her own children. From Atlanta to the glittering enclave of Rye, New York, she'd crossed a continent for this one chance. 3 weeks' wages for a single day, the agency had promised, if you can last. The fine print trembled in her hands. Amina was someone who knew the value of a hard day's work. She'd kept households standing in far less forgiving places, her parents' modest home, then her own, after her husband passed, scrubbing and mending her way through loss, always propelled by the need for stability, for warmth, for future. The Morrison's chef had smuggled out warnings in butter-stained napkins. Keep your distance, they sense fear. But Amina carried something stronger than caution. She carried the lessons her grandmother taught her. People aren't born difficult, baby. They learn it somewhere. She stood in the foyer now, under a chandelier rotund as a moon, greeted not with kindness, but with 3 cold blue stares, eye level to her waist. Triplets, perfect in symmetry, dressed in designer black, their lips pressed flat. Behind them, nannies scurried like whispers, leaving doors ajar in their haste to exit. Mrs. Morrison, tall and elegant, delivered her withering introduction. You're aware of our situation? None have lasted past breakfast. My children are spirited. If you last until sunset, a bonus awaits. She measured Amina with the same eyes that measured diamonds. Amina's nod was calm. She understood, perhaps not the luxury, but certainly the threat hiding behind polite invitations. In the hush that followed, only the ticking of a gold clock marked time, stretching with anticipation. Behind the triplets' eyes glimmered a challenge, one they'd won 100 times before. But this time, something was different. Perhaps it was the way Amina met their gaze, steady and gentle, as if seeing past their legend, straight to the hearts beneath. Outside, the sun broke through storm clouds, lighting the house in gold, a promise or a warning. What no one could expect was about to happen. But by nightfall, the Morrison mansion would never be the same. Amina's first trial arrived not with shouts, but with a silence sharp as shattered glass. Breakfast, a daily battleground, waited in the gilded dining hall. Every placemat a chess square in a game the help always lost. There they sat, Julian, the ringleader, all clever grins and restless fingers. Alexander, twin to Julian but colder, stone-serious eyes and discipline veiling deeper storms. And Philip, the smallest, most inscrutable, with a stare that could freeze a clock mid-tick. 3 boys, identical in face, but each bearing their own brand of mischief. Amina entered holding a tray laden with silver, the scent of warm food inviting and familiar, betraying nothing of the memories she'd stirred into the pancakes. Cinnamon, vanilla, hope. The table was long enough for a kingdom, and every chair told a story, kicked, gouged, wobbly with the scars of 100 failed mornings. House staff watched from the hall's shadowy edges, breaths held, as she laid out eggs for Julian, yogurt for Alexander, pancakes for Philip. She could sense their strategy unfurling. a silent pact decided with one darted glance. The boys exchanged looks, Julian's eyebrow arching in challenge, Alexander's lips tightening, Philip's fingers twitching beneath the table. At first, silence, then a storm. Julian accidentally knocked over his juice, amber spilling toward Alexander's crisp white shirt. Alexander rose to it, not with outrage, but a cold-eyed plan, flipping his dish, eggs smeared across the table. Philip was quiet, almost gentle, but it was he who let the syrup pool slowly, threatening to drip onto Amina's shoes. She understood. This was the test. Most maids would raise their voice, maybe shriek, dash for napkins, thus proving themselves to be prey. But Amina's training ran deeper than fear. She knelt to the boy's level, stoic, calm, her hands unhurried as she soaked up the mess. "Do you know," she said gently, "my own boys used to spill breakfast every morning before school. The trick we learned was, if you clean it up together, it never feels like trouble. Should we do that now?" The boys didn't answer, but they didn't pull away either. Alexander's eyes narrowed, calculating. Julian, caught off guard, almost smiled, but stifled it fast. Philip's intrigue flickered, curiosity warring with routine. From the gilded threshold, Mrs. Morrison hovered, watching, always expecting disaster. The triplets had broken every staff member before, some in minutes, others by dousing them in food or words so vicious they still echoed in empty corridors. But never like this. No screaming, no threats, just a steady, unbroken gaze and an invitation. Julian, testing the limits, swept his arm, knocking a platter of berries to the floor. They scattered like rubies. The old ritual: break, watch, win. Without even a sigh, Amina began gathering the berries. "Blue and red berries together," she smiled. "Remind me of a summer thunderstorm. Would you like to tell me your favorite storm?" The boys faltered, a moment's confusion fracturing their unity. Yet, feeling their control slipping, Alexander struck back. "She can't last. Nobody does." His voice was low, barely louder than a thought. Amina only smiled the way a mother settles a restive heart. "There's a first time for everything. Sometimes all it takes is a new start." But as she cleared the last crumbs, she didn't see Philip's hand snake beneath the table, and Julian slip a small envelope into it, a secret, a challenge, a perfectly orchestrated trap. One they believed no maid could defeat. What Amina didn't know was that before lunchtime, the boys' real test would begin, a test that had chewed up every predecessor before her. But this time, something none of them expected began to crack the walls they built around themselves. This time, a seed of possibility had been planted. Whether it would survive the afternoon, no one dared to guess. The clock's pendulum swung heavy, slicing silence into taut ribbons as Amina swept the last berry from the marble floor. The triplets eyed her like sphinxes guarding their riddles, faces unreadable, fingers twitching for the next move. The Morrison mansion, with its gold-veined corridors and endless echo, seemed to shrink around them, a crucible built for battle. After breakfast, the boys vanished, quick as shadows. When Amina entered the playroom, the door slammed behind her with military precision. The room was a landscape of traps, building blocks sharp as caltrops, toy cars rigged as ankle breakers, a fort of chairs balanced dangerously on books. Julian lounged in the fort, a captain atop a private warship of chaos. Alexander read a comic, upside down, his watchful eyes pinned to Amina's every move. Philip sat silently at a chessboard, hands folded over an envelope, daring her to ask. She maneuvered through their obstacles, never stumbling, never once scolding. "Looks like you've built a whole new city here," she said, hopping over toy traps. "Mind if I visit?" Her voice was sunlit, unruffled. Julian made a non-committal grunt. Alexander shrugged, but Philip's eyes softened, interest flickering. But alloys of mischief and trust are forged in fire. The moment she knelt to gather the blocks, Julian hollered, "Watch out!" Too late. A bucket of flour rained from above, ghosting her head and shoulders, coating the expensive rug in a snowdrift tableau. Laughter burst from the boys, wild and jubilant, a ritual victory dance. Amina, blanching white, brushed herself off. She peered at her reflection in the lacquered piano. For a moment, a heartbeat, her hand trembled. Mrs. Morrison stormed in, voice cutting. "What have you done? Amina, go clean yourself up." But Amina, calm as a steady tide, held up a hand. "Before I do, may I ask, has anyone ever shown you how to turn flour into dough? Where I come from, we call that a blessing." The boys fell silent, confused. Laughter ebbed, replaced by curiosity's quiet pulse. But as she rose, Alexander scowled. "You're not fun. The others were fun to chase away." He flicked the comic aside, anger sharpening his jaw. "Why don't you quit?" Amina's smile faltered just enough for the boys to sense something real, a flash of pain quickly buried. "You want me gone?" she murmured, voice steady. "Then you'll have to try harder." Enraged at not breaking her, Julian and Alexander doubled down. Doors slammed, paint splattered on windows, locked closets, all orchestrated at breakneck speed. Philip, slower, started to hand her the secret envelope, but Julian's glare made him pocket it once more. As the house descended into riot, whispers swirled, "She'll be gone by sunset." Staff watched from behind doors, some secretly rooting for Amina, others resigned. Nobody stepped in. The boys made sure of that. Later, as Amina collected paintbrushes and righted toppled furniture, the envelope finally slid to her feet. Picking it up, she found 3 words on a scrap inside. "Find the key." No map, no clue. Only locked doors and hidden rules in a mansion built to trap and test. The triplets disappeared, the house grown vast and silent again. Somewhere, a clock chimed noon, a countdown that seemed to echo, "How much longer?" Amina's muscles ached, hope flickered, but she refused to bend. She tucked the envelope into her pocket, eyes scanning shadows as if searching for answers written in dust motes. But she would soon learn, the real battle, the one that broke every maid before, was just beginning. And this time, the triplets were ready to raise the stakes. By sundown, someone or something would finally break. By late afternoon, shadows stretched long and strange across the Morrison mansion, carving the world outside into shifting shapes. Inside, the air crackled with expectation. The moment of reckoning, that silent hour when most maids collapsed or fled, pride in tatters. But Amina moved through the halls with a stubborn rhythm, the secret envelope's 3 words, "Find the key," burning in her mind. The triplets had vanished. Not a giggle, not a whisper, echoed through the house's endless rooms. The staff watched from corners, faces drawn with worry and fatigue. A hush thrummed between the staircase and the second-floor balcony, heavy with the memory of so many failed attempts. Every surface gleamed with deliberate menace, freshly polished, every mirror an eye, every light a spotlight. The boys had planned something big. A scream pierced the silence, shrill, childish, and unmistakably frightened. The sound ricocheted down empty corridors, summoning a distant cold fear that prickled Amina's skin. She dropped her cleaning rag and ran, heart hammering, shoes pounding on ornate rugs. Her mind stabbed at possibilities, a real accident, a desperate ploy, or the cruelest test yet. She found them in the attic. Chaos splashed across the battered floorboards. Julian, usually so cocky, was pale and trembling, jacket torn at the sleeve. Alexander hovered grimly nearby, cheeks streaked with tears he'd never own up to. Only Philip stood apart, not afraid, not defiant, just crushed by guilt, clutching a twisted wire hanger in his shaking hands. A heavy trunk, once locked, lay tumbled. Boards beneath it sagged ominously, and a loose plank threatened to give way above a gaping, splintered hole. The floor's rotted heart opened by mischief gone too far. They tried to move the trunk for one final trick, but it collapsed, nearly pinning Julian's arm. He was safe, barely, but shock and fear warred on his face. The boys stood frozen, at the ragged edge of their bravado, their unity cracked. They had never been in true danger before. This was no game. Nowhere to hide behind pranks or bravado. Amina ran to Julian, kneeling and cradling his trembling fingers, her voice low and certain. "You're safe. I'm here." Alexander fought tears, but Amina pulled him close too. "It's not your fault," she whispered, pulling Philip gently to her side. "Scars heal, so do hearts." Shame, hot and unfamiliar, flashed across the triplets' faces. For the first time, they looked truly vulnerable. 3 lonely boys trapped behind the armor of privilege, desperate for care. Downstairs, Mrs. Morrison's heels sounded like gunfire on marble as she approached. But when she saw her sons huddled against Amina's arms, she stopped, stunned into silence. Something in her eyes, fear maybe, or surprise, flashed and faded. She did not speak. In the attic, dank with dust and regret, Amina gathered the boys in a circle. "Every house has secrets," she said quietly, fishing the envelope from her pocket. "But the real key, what you were searching for, isn't hidden in any room." She tapped her heart. "It's here, letting someone in." For a long time, the boys didn't speak. Philip, barely audible, finally whispered, "Will you stay, even when we mess up?" Amina smiled, rough edges gone. "If you'll let me." That was the breakthrough. Not a burst of triumph, but an unspoken agreement. A new fragile bond born out of disaster and truth. As dusk pooled in the mansion's corners, Amina led them down from the attic, a little slower, a little closer, past the traps and tricks of the day. Tonight, the real battle was over, but the hardest choice still waited. Would the walls they'd built return? Or could trust, at last, grow in the heart of the house that broke everyone else? They would all find out tomorrow. But for now, hope echoed where doubt once reigned. Night unfurled like velvet over the Morrison estate, the air outside heavy with summer's promise. Inside, the mansion felt smaller, no longer an echo chamber of loneliness, but a crucible where everything had been burned down to something raw and true. After the attic ordeal, Amina led the triplets, still silent, to the kitchen. Her uniform bore streaks of dust and flour, a survivor's armor, and the boys hovered near her like satellites in search of gravity. Dinner was quiet. No challenges, no traps, just cautious glances and restless hands. Mrs. Morrison sat at the end of the table, her usually icy posture softened by worry and something new, bewilderment. For years, her son's exploits had driven away every caregiver, but tonight she found 3 boys transformed, clutching the edges of their chairs as if something vital depended on staying. Amina broke the stillness. "How about a midnight treat? Something my grandma taught me. Key cakes." The boys stared, 3 pairs of blue eyes flickering with hope. Together they mixed and kneaded, laughter hesitant at first, then tumbling out as dough stuck to their fingers and sugar dusted their hair. Julian, now unburdened, confessed, "I thought you'd leave like the others." Alexander nodded, jaw unclenched. Philip, voice barely more than a breath, whispered, "We didn't want to be alone." "Not really." The kitchen, once a site of warfare, became warm with shared secrets and the scent of baking. As the cakes rose in the oven, Amina gathered the triplets close. "When you trust someone, you give them the key to your heart. It's not about tricks or traps. It's about letting someone stay, even when you're scared they'll leave." Julian offered her the crumpled scrap, "Find the key," and for the first time, his smile wasn't a weapon but an invitation. Upstairs, Mrs. Morrison watched through a cracked door. The old fortress of protocol and distance wavered. She stepped into the glow of kitchen light and quietly placed a hand on each son's shoulder. For the first time, the boys didn't pull away. That night, under a full moon, the Morrison mansion was transformed. The triplets, for so long united by mischief and defense, now found love in laughter, in small acts of trust, a hand on a shoulder, a shared secret. Amina stood by the window, gazing at the gardens lit silver and gold, hope swelling in her chest. She had survived not by outsmarting them, but by reaching them. She had found the key. And as the boys drifted to sleep, the mansion sighed, a relic at peace for the first time in years. But as the clock chimed midnight, Amina realized the real reward wasn't a bonus. It was the beginning of something new for the boys, for their mother, and quietly for herself. And on this night, no one wished to flee. What none of them yet knew, tomorrow the world itself would feel different. Dawn crept quietly across the Morrison estate, spilling warmth over marble floors and gilded walls. The house, no longer a cold museum of broken routines, breathed with new life. Sunlight threaded through the kitchen, illuminating flowery footprints. Evidence of last night's laughter, not sabotage. A chorus of birds replaced the usual hush, as if nature itself sensed the shift. Amina awoke before the house stirred, her heart light with a courage hard won. She gazed at the photo of her own children tucked into her pocket, a silent reminder of courage and hope. The Morrison triplets, still tangled in dreams, slept soundly for once, their faces slack with the peace of trust. She lingered at their doorway, marveling at their transformation, from restless pranksters, always poised to defend and destroy, to vulnerable boys learning at last how to let someone stay. At breakfast, the table felt different. No poised traps, no defiant eyes, just three boys vying for her attention, trading stories and hopes as if the weight of the world had finally lifted. Even Mrs. Morrison, once ice-bound and wary, folded herself into the scene. She poured tea for Amina, a small but seismic act of gratitude. Her voice, freshly gentle, broke the silence. I never believed anyone could reach them, but you, thank you. Amina smiled, accepting not just the tea, but her place in the house, earned through patience, empathy, and quiet resilience. The day drifted by in easy rhythms. The boys led her into their secret corners, treehouses, shadows behind velvet curtains, attic hideaways now stripped of menace. With each step, their walls fell away. They asked about her life, her own sons, the things she missed, and in return they shared their dreams, climbing mountains, building rockets, writing stories where every hero gets a second chance. In the garden, the triplets buried the old envelope beneath the roots of a rosebush. "We don't need it anymore," Philip declared, his brothers nodding in solemn unity. Together they wished for new beginnings. No more games played at the cost of kindness. As evening painted the sky in pink and gold, the mansion stood transformed, not by fortune, but by the simple, stubborn act of compassion. Amina, once seen as just another maid, was now a cornerstone, proof that even the most wounded hearts can heal with patience and love. Standing at the window, Amina watched night unfurl its silk across the estate. She breathed deeply, peace settling into the marrow of her bones. The boys chased fireflies on the lawn, laughter echoing across the gardens. For the first time, their joy was unburdened, defiant against a world that had taught them to push everyone away. She thought of all the false keys, all the locked doors, all the battles quietly lost and bravely fought. And as the first star blinked awake overhead, she whispered, more to herself than anyone, "Sometimes the key isn't to unlock the door, it's to open your heart and invite the world in." And so the legendary mansion's story changed, anew for all who dared to care. The echo of that lesson lingered long after the lights flickered out, soft as hope, bright as morning, promising that no lock is ever too strong if met with love.